I'm trying to see if anybody talking right this second. I can't really tell. I don't think so.
And they do not overlap. You or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence about the case, immediately leave that person and report the matter to one of my bailiffs, who will then notify me. If he or she persists, then likewise notify my bailiff, who will notify me. In addition, you cannot have any cell phones, tablets, laptops, or other electronic devices in this courtroom. You may use these devices during recesses, of course, but even then you must not use your cell phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or to communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in the case. Do not take photographs, video recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or of your fellow jurors. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you also must not communicate with anyone outside the jury room. If someone needs to reach you to contact you in an emergency, the court can receive messages and deliver them to you without delay. So if a contact phone number hasn't already been provided, we will do so before we leave this evening. Now, this case must be tried by you only on the evidence presented during your collective presence in this courtroom in front of the defendants, the attorneys, and the court. That means jurors must not conduct any investigation on their own. And this includes reading newspapers, watching television, using a computer, a cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or to the people and places involved in this case. And this applies whether you're at the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look up maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. What are the reasons for all these rules? These rules are imposed because jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence presented in the courtroom. If you investigate, research, or make inquiries on your own, the trial judge has no way to assure that the information you find is proper for this case. The parties, likewise, have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of what you might find. And that is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it, and to present argument with respect to that evidence. So any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having the opportunity that our judicial system promises. And any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result, which would require this entire trial process to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience, not just for the parties and for the court, but for the taxpayers. So if you violate these rules, you may be held in contempt of court and you could face sanctions, such as serving time in jail, paying a fine, or both. Further, you must not speak with the attorneys, the witnesses, or the defendants about any subject matter until your deliberations are complete. Now, in every criminal proceeding, a defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is it the duty of a defendant to prove his innocence. From the exercise of a defendant's right to remain silent, a jury is not permitted to draw any inference of guilt, and the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence your verdict in any manner whatsoever. The attorneys are trained in the rules of evidence and in trial procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections that they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it was made. And likewise, when an objection is upheld or sustained by me, you should not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, or what a witness might have said had he or she been permitted to answer the question. Additionally, during trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys out of your hearing to discuss matters of law and other matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when such conferences may be required or how long it will last, but when such conferences occur, they will be conducted so as to consume as little of your time as is necessary for a fair and orderly trial of this case. Now, the defendants, both defendants in this case, have entered pleas of not guilty. This means you must presume or believe that each defendant is innocent. The presumption stays with each defendant as to each material allegation in the indictment through each stage of the trial unless it has been overcome by the evidence to the exclusion of and beyond a reasonable doubt. To overcome the defendant's presumption of innocence, the state has the burden of proving, number one, the crime or crimes with which each defendant is charged were committed, and each defendant is the person who committed that crime. The defendants are not required to present evidence or prove anything. Whenever the words reasonable doubt are used, you must consider the following. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if having a conviction, it is one which is not stable but one which wavers and vacillates, then the charge is not proved beyond every reasonable doubt, and you must find the defendant not guilty because the doubt is reasonable. It is to the evidence introduced in this trial and to it alone that you are to look for that proof. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of each defendant may arise from the evidence, conflict in the evidence, or the lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant not guilty. If you have no reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant guilty. Now, it is up to you to decide what evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in considering your verdict. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You should also consider how the witnesses act as well as what they say. And some other things you should consider are, number one, did the witness seem to have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified? Number two, did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? Number three, was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? Number four, did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? And number five, does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony or other evidence in the case? You may rely upon your own conclusion about the credibility of any witness. You, a juror, may believe or disbelieve all or any part of the evidence or the testimony of any witness. Now, if you would like to take notes during this trial, you may do so. You have all been provided with a notepad and a pen for your use if you wish to take notes. Please do not write on the cover page of each of the notepads. That will prevent your notes from being inadvertently read when the notepads are collected. You should not take your notes with you during any recesses or overnight. During these recesses and overnight, your notepads will be collected by the bailiffs, and they're going to be locked and secured, and then they will be returned to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your jury deliberations and have been discharged from jury service, the bailiff will collect your notepads one final time, will turn them over to Madam Clerk for sealing, and then they will be destroyed. No one will ever read your notes, including this court. Now, if you do take notes during the trial, do not get so involved in the note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. It is sometimes difficult to take detailed notes and to pay attention to what the witnesses are saying at the same time. So if you do take notes, please be sure that your taking of notes does not interfere with your listening to and considering all the evidence. In addition, if you do take notes, please remember that any notes you take are for your individual use. Your notes are simply a tool to aid your individual memory. You should not compare your notes with other jurors in determining the content of any testimony or in evaluating the importance of any evidence. Your notes are not evidence and are by no means a complete outline of the proceedings or a list of highlights of the trial. Above all, your memory should be your greatest asset when it comes time to deliberate and render a decision in each of these cases. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you don't want to do so. That decision will be left up to you entirely. But whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by any notes. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's memory of the evidence. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, deciding a verdict is exclusively your job. I cannot participate in that decision in any way. Please disregard anything I may say or do that might make you think I prefer one verdict over the other. Now, this concludes part one of the instructions, and when all the evidence has been presented and after the attorneys have made their closing arguments, then the court will provide you with part two of the instructions. So at this time, I will call upon the state for its opening statement.
May it please the court?
Yes.
Counsel. We are all gathered here today because of a murderous plot that unfolded on January 15th, 2020. A wicked, premeditated murder, a vile scheme that was birthed by a specific group of co-defendants. Individuals who collectively, consciously, and callously worked together to ensure January 15th, 2020 was the day 23-year-old Charles McCormick died. The murder of Charles McCormick was personal. It was thought out, and it was brazenly executed in broad daylight without any fear of accountability. Why? Why did this group of co-defendants think they could exert such violence with impunity? The answer to that question comes down specifically to who was involved. Because this was not just any group of co-defendants. This was not a group of strangers. This was a group of individuals who knew one another, were close to one another, that were family. Every single one of them that participated in this crime were members of ATK, a local rap group. All but one of them were related by blood. This was a crime committed by family. The names of the guilty: Akeem Robinson, who's sitting right here, whose nickname is Keemy to his family, Ksoo, his rap name, Leroy Whitaker, a co-defendant sitting before him, a cousin, whose nickname is Scotty, Dominique Barner, whose nickname is Butta, their friend, their co-defendant, the only one not related to the others by blood. But he might as well have been, because for years, they have known Barner. For years, they have accepted him. For years, he is one of them. Abdul Robinson Jr., nicknamed Kareem K. Crazy, Akeem Robinson's biological brother. Hakeem Robinson's mother and Leroy Whitaker's father are siblings. Abdul Robinson Jr., Hakeem's biological brother, Leroy Whitaker's cousin, and Torrigon Williams, another cousin, also played a role in this crime. After the murder of Charles McCormick was completed by Dominique Varner, Hakeem Robinson, and Leroy Whitaker, and they had to flee what they three had just accomplished, their premeditated murder of Charles McCormick, Abdul Robinson Sr., nicknamed Blue, also got involved. That is Hakeem Robinson's father, and he had to come to the rescue of Hakeem Robinson's cousin, Leroy Whitaker, and their friend and their co-defendant, Dominique Varner, because Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker, after fleeing with Hakeem Robinson from the murder, trying to escape the police, crashing their car, Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker went one way, Hakeem Robinson went another. And Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker found themselves trapped in a house that Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker broke into to escape the police that were looking for all three of them, trying to avoid getting caught, avoiding accountability for the murder they just committed in broad daylight. And because Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker were trapped, Abdul Robinson Sr. had to come pick them up. He picked them up and drove Dominique Varner and Leroy Whitaker away from that home, away from the police, and it was during that ride that he found out exactly what happened. But he continued to help them and drove them away. And for his actions, he's been charged with accessory after the fact. Throughout history, one common truth has been shared by every person who has drawn breath in this world. There is a day you are born and a day you die. And between those two moments, the life that unfolds, uniquely shaped by one's choices and one's actions. Some of those choices are more profound than others, some actions more impactful. But when a group of individuals, even a family, when they come together and intentionally commit a violent crime, a murder, shattering the laws we all share, there must be accountability. And it is precisely for that very reason that in this courtroom, today, 5 years later, Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker are sitting before you. And at this moment in the trial, with them, though unseen, are two simple but essential questions. Questions that the state will answer for you with the evidence. And those two questions, which you can write down, where were they? And what did they do on January 15th, 2020? Simple questions. Where were they and what did they do? But those simple questions for Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker have terrifying answers. Answers that they are desperate to keep hidden from each and every one of you. The truth can be a funny thing. Sometimes, the more out of desperation you try to suppress it, the more the guilty fight and rail against each and every aspect of it, the more obvious it becomes. For example, and I want you to hear these despicable words, let them sink in, because these are the words of Hakeem Robinson. Kill a nigga then go get my toes done. Kill a nigga, then go get my toes done. Those are his words that he attached to a video he took of himself as he sat in a chair in a nail salon getting a pedicure. Just a couple days after running Charles McCormick down on foot and executing him. You're going to see that video. You're going to read his words. You're going to see his tired feet. And when you look at that video, when you see him, when you see his words telling you what he did, believe him. And let that image, his answer to both of you, all of you, about what he did, sear your collective memories. On January 15th of 2020, these two co-defendants, they shared a motive, they shared a goal, and for their deeds, they will forever share guilt. What was their undoing? What has brought them here before all of you today? Simply, the combination of arrogance, mistakes, and bad luck. For justice's sake, thankfully, the murder of Charles McCormick was captured on video. Thankfully, these two co-defendants in particular left a trail of overwhelming and inescapable evidence in their violent, chaotic wake. Evidence that is much like an avalanche, quickly gaining momentum until that evidence ultimately and unavoidably catches up and buries all doubt in this case. So what kind of evidence are you going to hear? Are you going to see? Evidence in virtually every form imaginable. You're going to see evidence, you're going to hear evidence directly related to the motive in this case, because it was a personal motive, and we'll talk about that in a moment. You're going to see the video of the murder, and that video is a powerful piece of evidence, because not only does it capture the murder, it also captures the vehicle that was used by Dominic Barner, Hakeem Robinson, and Leroy Whitaker when they committed this crime, a stolen Nissan Altima. And you will see that vehicle on video. And there will be no doubt that that vehicle was occupied by the people who committed this crime. And that vehicle was collected, well, evidence inside it was collected immediately after this crime, immediately after they fled from committing the murder from the police. And that car crashed. And inside it, amongst the items that were collected, DNA evidence. DNA evidence for Leroy Whitaker and Hakeem Robinson. Fingerprint evidence for Hakeem Robinson. DNA fingerprints forever tethering them to that car, to their crimes. You will also see on that video of the murder exactly what the shooter was wearing. And I want you to pay particular attention to it, because this is a video, not a still photograph. You'll get to see the whole thing. And you will see that the shooter was wearing a two-tone hoodie, gray chest, dark black arms, black hoodie pulled up over his head. And I want you to take note of that, because you will see that same hoodie in photographs and videos wrapped around Hakeem Robinson's guilty body. You will see the distinct firearm that he carried when he committed that murder, when he pulled the trigger. And you will see that same firearm in another video in Hakeem Robinson's hands. Not for entertainment. He used it for murder on January 15, 2020. You also will be presented with call records showing communication amongst these co-defendants and cell site location information, placing Leroy Whitaker, placing Hakeem Robinson where they should not have been, placing them where the guilty were. You will see social media posts, in addition to the nail salon video that we've already talked about, another video posted to Hakeem Robinson's Instagram account just a couple days after the murder, a video of Charles McCormick rapping a song, but when you get to Charles McCormick in the video and you see his face, what's added? Hand emojis with the text, bye-bye. And then that's followed up by the nail salon video that we've discussed, where he needed to get his toes done. What I want you to remember, because there is going to be so much evidence in this case against both defendants, and so many different types of evidence, that it's much like a puzzle. While they're powerful on their own, independently, when you put them together, and they come together so easily, so intuitively, when you put these pieces together, you will be presented with the truth of January 15, 2020. And that will be a picture showing each and every one of you who committed this crime. And what will be staring back at you will be the crystal clear pictures of Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker, just as clear as if you were to turn your gaze over there at this very moment. One of the key pieces of evidence that exists, as I have said, is the video recording of this murder. That video recording exists because Victor Kruger, a citizen, has nothing to do with this, just happened to have a dash cam in his truck, and just happened to be parked at the right place at the right time. That video is completely independent, wholly unbiased, and incapable of lying. It just captured what happened in high definition for each and every one of you to see. And so, when you watch that video, I want you to trust your eyes. Because again, it's not a single photo, it is a video that shows in detail as Hakeem Robinson, who is the shooter in this case, tracked Charles McCormick down on foot and executed him. Now, that video, essentially it's going to be a time machine, transporting each and every one of you individually and collectively back 5 years. That's how long ago this was. 5 years. Placing you in the position Victor Kruger found himself when he witnessed Charles McCormick's final terror-filled seconds on this earth. But you will get to watch that video from the safety of this courtroom. And I want to be very clear. This is a crime that happened 5 years ago, so when you watch that video, you're going to see the shooter looked like 5 years ago. Not today. It doesn't matter. It was 5 years ago. This video is going to be very, very powerful, and I want you to pay attention to it, but I do want to be clear about one thing. Based on the location of the camera, it does not capture the shooter's face. Just didn't. But it's okay, it didn't have to. It captured more than enough detail that that video, along with all of the other evidence in this case, will make it crystal clear that that individual was Hakeem Robinson. I don't expect that there will be any debate that what happened to Charles McCormick on that video is anything other than first-degree murder. I don't believe that will be a debate. The only question in this case for you to decide who's responsible. That is it. Bringing us back to those two very simple questions. Where were they and what did they do? What was the motive? Why did this crime take place? To fully understand that, why the crime took place, and the significance of the day, you have to know what happened exactly 1 year prior, on January 15th, 2019. On January 15th, 2019, Willie Addison, whose rap name is Boss Coon, was in a vehicle with family when shots rang out. Willie Addison was struck and ultimately died as a result of his injuries. But he wasn't the only one in the vehicle. Also inside the vehicle on January 15, 2019, Abdul Robinson Sr., Hakeem's father, because you see, Willie Addison was Abdul Robinson Sr.'s stepson. He raised him as his own son. Willie Addison, Robinson's brother. Also in that vehicle, Abdul Robinson Jr., Hakeem's other brother, Leroy Whitaker's cousin. And Abdul Robinson Jr. was struck in the head. He survived, but he suffered lasting effects that would prevent him from running down his target a year later. Physical limitations that Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker did not share. Also in the vehicle, Torgon Williams, their cousin, and a couple of others. And while it is true that neither Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, or Dominique Barner were in the car when those shots rang out on January 15, 2019, it doesn't matter, because it was still their family in that car. It was their family whose blood was spilled. Physical injuries sometimes can heal. Physical pain can diminish. But memories, a vendetta, that lasts someone's lifetime. Now, I want to be very, very clear. Charles McCormick was not involved in the shooting of Willie Addison or anyone else in that vehicle. Wasn't involved. Charles McCormick's sin, what made him a target, was that he was affiliated with people who are part of another local rap group, 6 Block. And 6 Block and ATK are rivals. They don't like each other. They hate each other. And one of the traditions of both groups is producing rap music, drill rap, diss songs that make fun of or talk disrespectfully about members of their ops, the other group, who have been shot and killed. So following that tradition, Charles McCormick in 2019 put out a song, and that song referenced the shooting of Willie Addison. And as you can imagine, that is not something that either Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, or their family were happy about. So Charles McCormick became a target, an easy target. He's the ops. This was about sending a message. Because not only was it personal, but it's about respect. And we aren't going to let our ops sing songs like that, not about our family. That is why Charles McCormick was targeted. So on January 15, 2020, 1 year anniversary, Willie Addison's death, Charles McCormick walked out of his apartment on Atlantic Boulevard, made his way to his car, and then drove to Express Employment, a temp agency located on the Merrill Road Shopping Plaza. And he went there because he had just been selected for a new job. Charles McCormick needed to get the details to start that new job. But when he drove there, he had no idea that in a Nissan Altima, he was being stalked by Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, and their good friend Dominique Barner, who was driving both of them, pursuing Charles McCormick from his apartment complex all the way up to the Merrill Road Shopping Plaza. And they pulled in, and they saw that Charles McCormick parked his car and had walked into Express Employment. So what did they do? They waited. Hakeem Robinson with his X-Star model rifle, Leroy Whitaker with his AR-15 rifle, both loaded, rounds chambered, ready to fire, because the plan at that point was when Charles McCormick walks out, Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker will jump out of that stolen Nissan Altima with their rifles and gun him down. And Dominique Barner, their friend, will pick them up and drive them out of there. But they had to wait. And they had to wait. And as they waited, Dominique Barner decided it was better to reposition their vehicle. And so he was actually able to drive over to where Charles McCormick parked and pulled into a parking space behind Charles McCormick's car and just over to the left. And that is where they waited. And then, just around 11 a.m. that morning, a Wednesday morning, Charles McCormick finished inside. He got a red folder with the paperwork and the details so he could start his new job. And with that red folder in his hand, he said his goodbyes. Miss Saunders, who owned that agency at the time, was a friend of his grandmother. Said goodbye to her and opened the door and began to walk outside. When Charles McCormick did that, all he had in his hand was that red folder. And that red folder represented the promise of employment and the hope of a future filled with false hope. He began to take his fateful steps towards the parking lot, not knowing who and what was waiting for him. So, for a few seconds, the bright light of the morning sun warmed his skin, saturated his eyes, and fresh air filled his optimistic lungs. For a few seconds, Charles had no idea he would never get to start that new job. There would be no more birthdays to celebrate. He wouldn't see or talk to his mother again. He had no idea there were seconds left to believe in a tomorrow. Seconds left in his young life. And then, in an instant, that all changed. Because Hakeem Robinson got excited and jumped out of that Nissan Altima early. He didn't wait for Charles McCormick to make it back to his car, where he was going to then hop out and shoot him so he could easily drive away. Couldn't wait, he got too excited. So he hopped out early and chased Charles McCormick down on foot. And when he got out of that car, you will see in the video, again, two-tone hoodie, gray chest, dark black arms, dark hood pulled up over his head, not out of shame, but an attempt to conceal as much of his recognizable face as possible. In his hands, an X-Star model AR rifle pistol, because it's got a very short stock, so it's easier to control. And I want you, again, to remember that, because you're going to see that same rifle again in a video in his hands. And that rifle was chambered in .223 caliber. And with that rifle in Hakeem Robinson's hands, his eyes locked onto Charles McCormick, their prey, the reason that they were there, his finger caressed the metal trigger to his rifle. But that wasn't just a piece of metal. On that morning, that trigger represented the power of life and death for Hakeem Robinson, for his co-defendants, for the plan that they came up with to murder Charles McCormick. And so intentionally, deliberately, Charles McCormick, as he tried to run away, Hakeem Robinson pulled the trigger. And when he pulled that trigger, a deafening sound thundered through the air as the gunpowder inside the chambered .223 caliber round ignited, propelling his round, their will, out of his barrel at thousands of feet per second. Charles McCormick did not stand a chance. And as he turned to run, first back towards Express Employment, and then around the building on the sidewalk, he barely made it that far before he was struck by one of those rounds and fell to the ground. Hakeem Robinson, his hunter, designated executioner, never stopped pursuing, and he was on him seconds. This entire lasted about 10 seconds or less. He's on top of him with his rifle pointed at Charles McCormick. He's on the ground, injured, unarmed, defenseless, in need of some mercy. But there would be no mercy. Not on January 15, 2020, not on Willie's Day. So, without mercy, and to fulfill the plan, the murder that they collectively came up with and were participating in, Hakeem Robinson pulled the trigger over and over and over and over again. And each and every pull of that trigger resulted in hot metal tearing in to Charles McCormick's body. Hot metal slashing open his flesh. Hot metal ripping through his muscles. Hot metal blowing open his skull. Flesh, brain matter, even teeth were sent flying through the air. Tissue, blood, metal fragments, and ejected shell casings left littering the ground. 23 years of life undone in an instant. That paper folder that just a few seconds ago Charles thought meant he had a future, obsolete, meaningless, discarded, on the ground, soaking in his blood. It took Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, co-defendants, less than 10 violent-filled seconds to turn the cold concrete slab beneath Charles's body into an unpeaceful resting place, forever stained with Charles' blood and forever stained with their guilt for what they did. You were going to see that unfold on that video. But what you will also see is that after that murder was completed, and Hakeem Robinson got back into the passenger side of that Nissan Altima stolen car so it couldn't be connected back to them, driven by Dominique Varner, they took off. They sped away from their guilt, trying to outrun it. But unfortunately for them, they didn't just have a dash cam video from Victor Krueger. Because this was a shopping plaza, at the other end was a Publix. And coming out of the Publix was an officer, Officer Collins. And Officer Collins heard the gunfire. Now he's a great distance off at the other end of that shopping plaza, but he hears the gunfire and he looks over and he sees that two-tone hoodie individual with a rifle hopping back into that Nissan Altima on the passenger side. Now, from where he was positioned, he didn't see Charles McCormick. He didn't know that he had been shot or that he had been killed, but he heard shots. He knew something bad happened. That the individual with that rifle was getting into that Nissan Altima and taking off. So he got into his patrol car and tried to get behind it. And he followed that Nissan Altima as it pulled out of the shopping plaza onto Merrill Road, heading back towards Townsend. Officer Collins pursued it. Dominique Varner was driving. Leroy Whitaker, Hakeem Robinson still in that Nissan with their guns. And Dominique Varner, trying to get all of them out of there, drove at a high rate of speed, reaching speeds of approximately 100 miles an hour, driving recklessly, turning onto Townsend, going into a residential neighborhood. So Officer Collins is trying to keep up, activates his lights and sirens, but they're not stopping. And he radios other officers for assistance. And as he's trying to maintain a visual on their car that they are in, he notices that the Nissan Altima is going to Townsend and it blows through an intersection at Townsend and Lone Star. And that's where he loses visual. But just as he's losing visual of that Nissan Altima, another officer is radioing. Hey, I'm down Townsend, I got it. So another officer has visual of that car and begins pursuing it, ultimately down Alderman, which is right off Townsend. Officer Collins, once he gets to the intersection where he lost them, turns onto Lone Star, essentially traveling parallel to the other officer and that Nissan Altima that he's hearing over the radio. And as he is traveling parallel, he hears over the radio that that Nissan Altima has abruptly stopped and turned around. Speeding back, gets around the other officer, heading back towards Townsend. So Officer Collins does the same thing. He stops. He turns around and starts heading back. And once he gets from Lone Star down to that intersection of Townsend, he looks to the left, and further down Townsend, great distance from where he is at, he sees that same Nissan Altima pop back out, trying to get out of there, trying to escape. And so he is trying to catch up. But it's also a little after 11 a.m. on a Wednesday in a residential neighborhood. So he's having to pay attention to his surroundings. And as he's driving to catch up, still from a great distance back, that Nissan Altima crashes. And when it crashes, based on where Officer Collins is at in his vehicle, still a good distance back, he notices one individual get out and run east towards the house that they crashed in front of, and another wearing that two-tone hoodie with a rifle, who you will know is Hakeem Robinson, goes west towards another house in the direction of Belmead. So Officer Collins continues to drive, eventually making it up to that area where he stops his car, gets out, draws his weapon, because he's going to go after the person who had the rifle. But he only saw the person with the rifle for a couple seconds as he darted across the street, as he's driving from way back. So he cautiously approaches the house where that individual ran. And then there's a fence. And when he gets to the fence, he sees for about a second that individual in the two-tone hoodie clearing the backyard fence. Never sees him again. Doesn't get close to him. You will see that person as they dart across Belmead, because it was captured on a video from a house on a Ring doorbell, wearing that same two-tone hoodie. Officer Collins radios to other officers direction of travel so they can try and find him, but they don't. And he goes back to that Nissan Altima to secure it, make sure any evidence inside it could be collected. Based on where he was at when that Nissan crash, he completely missed that there was a third person in the car. But we know that there are 3 people in the car. It's on many different types of evidence that you will see in this trial. But one is video surveillance. Because just as the shooter, Hakeem Robinson, is running across Belmead, west, another house, east, is video surveillance of 2 individuals running through the backyard. And those 2 individuals, you will come to know, based on the evidence, are Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Barner. They, just like Hakeem Robinson, were desperate to escape what they had done. Unlike Hakeem Robinson, they left their firearms behind in that Nissan Altima. Then, what happens next doesn't have anything to do really with Hakeem Robinson. It has more to do with Dominique Barner and Leroy Whitaker. Only it shows how desperate all 3 of them were to get away from the murder they were all too willing to commit. Dominique Barner and Leroy Whitaker made their way to the backyard of a home located further down Townsend. 1033 Townsend. A home that 57-year-old Barbara Buckley lived in, along with her husband. But that morning, her husband had gone to work. She was home alone. So she thought. However, what she did not know in that moment was that Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Barner had made their way into her backyard because the police are in the neighborhood looking for them, looking for all 3 of them. So they go into her porch, her patio, and through her rear sliding glass door, Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Barner decide they're going in. They don't have permission. They don't know her, never met her, never been in that home before. But they are desperate to escape the police, to evade them, to evade getting caught for what they had just done. And with that intention, to evade the police, Dominique Barner and Leroy Whitaker go into Barbara Buckley's home without permission, and they try to hide inside. Miss Buckley comes out of a back bathroom, and she notices the front door to one of her bedrooms is shut. And she thinks, that cat, maybe maybe the cats ran in and accidentally shut the door, and now they're trapped. So she goes to her bedroom door, and she opens it, step inside to check on her cats. Her cats aren't inside. Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barner are. Two people she does not know, has never met, never seen before, and should not be in her home. And she tells them, "Get out." Uses some more colorful language, but "Get out, what are you doing here?" And they try and plead and say, "Well, we're hiding from people." Doesn't say, "We just committed a murder and it's the police looking for us." But she's like, "I don't care. Get out of my house." She walks to her front door, telling Dominic Barner, telling Leroy Whitaker to get out. She opens that door, and she begins to yell for help. But Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barner aren't going anywhere. They can't go outside. That's where the police are. They just committed a murder along with Hakeem Robinson. So Dominic Barner and then Leroy Whitaker, who assists him, physically grab Barbara Buckley and pull her inside her own home. Shut the door. She is physically thrown to the ground. While she's on the ground, Dominic Barner and Leroy Whitaker are there. Dominic Barner reaches down with both hands, puts them around her neck, and begins to choke her. At one point, Leroy Whitaker even asks Dominic Barner wants him to hurt her. She can't fight back enough to get away. She's trapped in her home, and she complies. And so they then make her sit in her own living room. Dominic Barner takes her phone so she can't call for help. And Leroy Whitaker goes back to that front bedroom where he uses his phone to call for help. Doesn't call Hakeem Robinson. Why would he? He can't help him. He's running west. So who does he call? He calls Abdul Robinson Jr., Hakeem's brother. And he asks for help. And you're going to see phone records corroborating that, from Leroy Whitaker to Abdul Robinson Jr., and then also to Abdul Robinson Sr., his father. You're going to see how he sent them pin drops, location information, showing where they were at. Again, they haven't been in that house before. They don't live there. They're not supposed to be there. And while they wait for help, Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barner take clothing from Miss Buckley and her husband so that they can change their appearance. They steal her clothes. And then after they've been there for about an hour, a red-orange Dodge Challenger driven by Abdul Robinson Sr., blue, his father, shows up. You'll see some video surveillance that captures that car as it comes down Townsend. He shows up, pulls into the driveway, and eventually Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barner go outside, leaving Miss Buckley behind in her own home for the first time in an hour. And there, they are driven away by Abdul Robinson Sr., who learns what happened and drives them away, helps them evade the police. After they drive Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barner away, Miss Buckley goes outside and, with the help of a neighbor, lifted to her feet. You see, well, she calls 911, but then she also sees an officer down the road. Because down the road, there crashed Nissan Altima, the murder car. And she tells the officer what happened to her. The officer tells her she's got to go back and wait at her house. He's sending officers, and detectives go and show up. And they meet with her because, again, they're still looking for the suspects. So they meet with Miss Buckley. She's able to give a very good general description, clothing description that matches the video of the backyard showing Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Varner as they run through it. You see their clothing. Her description matches those two individuals. She also got a very good look at the arms of Dominique Varner because he had some distinct tattoos on his forearms. She provides that description to the police. And so, based on her descriptions that day, Dominique Varner is identified as a potential suspect. They put together a photo spread, and they show that photo spread to Ms. Buckley. She identifies Dominique Varner, one of the two that came in my house, battered me, stole my phone, my clothing. The other individual, who is Leroy Whitaker, she never got a good look at his face, so she can't identify him. She didn't have to, because he did that for her. Because when Leroy Whitaker went in along with Dominique Varner and grabbed her and pulled her back inside, he left some of himself behind. Essentially a signed confession. 3 little letters, DNA, on Miss Buckley's clothing. A place it had no right to be. That DNA evidence, along with his cell phone records and location information, proved beyond all doubt it was Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Varner that broke into Miss Buckley's home and held her hostage as they tried to escape the police because of the murder they, along with Hakeem Robinson, just committed. Also, just down the road in that Nissan Altima, the murder car, some more powerful and unrefutable evidence was discovered. Inside that car that was occupied by the suspects in this case when it crashed, a couple of white shirts. DNA. DNA for Leroy Whitaker, Hakeem Robinson. From the interior swab of the vehicle, mixture of DNA included Hakeem Robinson. DNA in a car it had no right to be in. A car that's not connected to them in any way. Connected to the people who committed this crime. And also in that vehicle, 2 firearms. Now, neither one of the firearms recovered is the murder weapon, because that was carried away in the hands of Hakeem Robinson when he ran west and wasn't caught. But in that vehicle, a loaded AR-15 in the back, 26 rounds, including 1 round chambered, ready to fire. That was Leroy Whitaker's rifle. Wasn't a spectator in this. He was armed and fully willing and ready to participate, and participate he did, even though he did not pull a trigger. Also, a Glock handgun. And on the slide of that Glock, a fingerprint. Hakeem Robinson's. It's not just the evidence, it's also the location of that evidence in that Nissan Altima that was just occupied by the people who committed this crime. Now, you already know how Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Varner got out of there, but what about Hakeem Robinson? How did he escape? Well, based on his path of travel west through Townsend, that neighborhood, takes him to a nature preserve. And he went through that little park nature preserve and made it out of the other side at an apartment complex on Arlington Expressway. There, he needed a ride. And he was able to relay his location to his brother, Abdul Robinson Jr., who was with their cousin, Torgon Williams, because they both played a role in this crime as well. And at that moment, Abdul Robinson Jr. and Torgon Williams were back at Torgon's house on Dalehurst Drive, just behind the Merrill Road Shopping Plaza, where Torgon lived with his girlfriend 5 years ago, named Natalie. Now, Natalie was asleep and had no idea what had happened that morning. Abdul Robinson Jr. did, Torgon did, and they knew he needed help, just as Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Varner needed help. So they woke up Natalie. She was asked to go to that apartment complex and pick him up. She did. She brought him back to their house, where he was reunited with his brother, Abdul Robinson Jr., and his cousin, Torgon. That will be corroborated by another witness who lived at the apartment complex at the time, who saw a white female in a silver car matching the description of Natalie and the vehicle she drove over there, driving around the parking lot like she was looking for somebody. And that resident realized Natalie didn't really belong in the area. And she had also gotten an alert on her phone about JSO looking for suspects and a clothing description, including that two-tone hoodie. As Natalie was out front trying to find him, she heard another person coming through the woods wearing that two-tone hoodie. Now, she didn't get a long enough look to be able to say, I recognize that person. She's not going to be able to identify him. She got a quick glance because when she saw the clothing based on the alert, she got scared and ran back inside. But that was Hakeem Robinson coming out. Natalie picked him up and drove him back to Oregon for Abdul Robinson Jr. Dominic Varner was the first to be identified, first to be arrested, the first to be charged. And when he was initially arrested on January 15th of 2020, that same day, he wasn't completely forthcoming. He didn't walk in to the police and say, you got me, this is what I did, this is what we did. He minimized, he made some statements, but he minimized and didn't say who he was with. But he was charged, and he's going to testify in this case. So when he testifies, he's going to come out the back because he's in a jail uniform, he's in shackles, and you will learn that he has been charged with multiple crimes. That he has pled guilty to multiple crimes. He has pled guilty to second-degree murder for his involvement in driving and taking and participating in the murder of Charles McCormick with Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker. He's pled guilty. He's pled guilty to burglary with an assault or battery for what he and Leroy Whitaker did to Miss Buckley, breaking into her home to escape the police and grabbing her and pulling her back inside and holding her there. He's pled guilty to aggravated fleeing and attempting to elude law enforcement. And he has also pled guilty to a separate second-degree murder charge. When he testifies, he does not know what sentence he is going to get because he has not yet been sentenced. But for each and every one of those charges, he's pled guilty to the court, to the judge. And the judge will decide what sentence Dominic Varner gets. All he knows is what he's looking at. And he's looking at up to life in prison. Life, without parole. He can get that. His guideline sentence, which reflects the minimum he should get, absent a legal reason to go below, is 41.8 years, up to life in prison. Now, this cooperation does provide the court with a legal basis that allows the judge to go below 41.8 years, if the judge wants to. Doesn't have to. Entirely up to the judge. He also knows that best case scenario, there is no way he can get anything less than 20 years. So he's looking at 20 years, 2 decades, up to life in prison. And even with his cooperation, he can get life. But he's going to tell you what he did. And when he testifies, knowing what he has been charged with, what he has done. The state's not asking that you like him. The state's not asking that you think, I'd be friends with that guy. I'd hang out with him. Though that's exactly what Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker did, and what they have done for years. They're the same. But what he has to say, because he was involved, is enlightening. But also make no mistake, this case, without Dominique Barner, is proven. It's proven by all the evidence they left behind. It's proven by the DNA, it's proven by the fingerprints, it's proven by call records, it's proven by cell site location information, it's proven by the video of the murder, your own God-given common sense, as well as social media posts, among many other pieces of evidence. When Barner testifies, he is going to acknowledge Charles McCormick was targeted because of that song. A song that, by the way, you will see in evidence because it was on Hakeem Robinson's iCloud account. You get to hear it. He's going to confirm that was the motive, that was the reason that they found out, and Barner played a role in finding out where Charles McCormick lived. And on the morning of January 15, 2020, he calls Abdul Robinson Jr., his brother, Leroy Whitaker's cousin, says he's back. That's going to be confirmed by call records. And then what happens? Dominique Barner gets picked up by Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, Abdul Robinson Jr., and they, along with Torgon Williams, eventually all go over to Charles McCormick's apartment complex with the intent, one, killing him. Abdul Robinson Jr. and Torgon are in a clean car, a rental, Dodge Journey. Can't be tied back. It's a rental, excuse me. Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, and Dominique Barner are in a stolen car, a car that can't be tied back to them. And the role of the clean car is to basically try and make sure they don't get pulled over by the police when they're going where they need to go. So collectively, they go to Charles McCormick's apartment complex. And again, Hakeem Robinson is armed with his rifle, as is Leroy Whitaker. And there, they wait for him. But as they wait, because it takes so long, they get distracted. They miss Charles McCormick when he comes out of his apartment. He's able to make it to his car. Then he's able to drive away from his complex towards the shopping plaza on Merrill Road. And so they pivot. Dominique Barner, Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker pursue him, stalk him, follow him, all with the intent to end his life. And that's when they make it to that shopping center. And ultimately what unfolds, you will witness with your own eyes. What Dominique Barner will add is that when they got to the shopping plaza, not only initially was it, again, Leroy Whitaker and Hakeem Robinson that were going to jump out and kill Charles McCormick, but Barner says, I changed the plan. We were too far back. It's a shopping center. It's getting busy. So he relocates closer to Charles McCormick's car, and the plan then becomes that Hakeem Robinson's going to hop out as soon as Charles makes it back to his car. While they wait for Charles to exit, Hakeem Robinson does two things. One, using Instagram on his phone, he contacts Raekwon Howard. Raekwon Howard, who is affiliated with Six Block. They're ops. Tells him, got one of your boys slipping. Let him know they're getting ready to take somebody out, but doesn't say who. That will be confirmed by Instagram records showing that video call between Hakeem Robinson's Instagram account and Raekwon Howard's right before the murder. Dominique Barner will also tell you that as they waited, Hakeem Robinson thought about not using his rifle. He didn't want to burn that gun. To use it for murder, so he thought about using Varner's glove. Remember whose fingerprints were on that? You may not like Dominic Varner. He is a criminal, and he is going to spend decades up to life in prison for what he has done. But because you may not like him, because he is guilty, that does not absolve Hakeem Robinson or Leroy Whitaker of their guilt. It does not change what they did. So when Dominic Varner testifies, he's a criminal. He just won't be the only criminal in this courtroom. Another person you will hear from is Abdul Robinson Sr. family. And when he testifies, you will learn that he has been charged with and pled to 2 different counts of accessory after the fact. One for this case and one for another. Unlike Dominic Varner, there has been a partial negotiation with Abdul Robinson, and the maximum sentence he can get is 20 years. Again, it will be decided by the judge. But he's also in his mid-50s. And he has some health issues. And a sentence of 20 years could take him to his life expectancy. And he knows when he comes in that he's going to be despised, that he's going to be hated by his family, by Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, maybe others in this courtroom. The question is not, do you like Abdul Robinson Jr., or excuse me, Sr.? The question isn't, do you think he's being a good father? The question is, what he has to say, is it corroborated by the evidence? Independent evidence. Evidence he has no control over, that he could not manufacture. Is it corroborated by the evidence? Not, do we like him? And what he is going to tell you is that Willie Addison was his son. That he was in the car with him, along with his other son, Abdul Jr., when they were shot. Oregon, shot. And that after that shooting, they became aware of Charles McCormick's song, and they didn't like it. Abdul Jr., who was shot in the head but recovered, and his brother Hakeem Robinson, they were very angry over that song. And he will tell you that he was contacted on January 15, 2020 by Abdul Jr. and Leroy Whitaker, Scotty, because they needed help. And though he didn't know about the murder before it happened, didn't participate in it, he went, he picked him up, and he found out all about it. And he still drove him away and helped him get out of there. He also will tell you that he is aware of that dash cam video that captured the murder. And he has seen it. He will tell you in this courtroom, regardless of what you think of him, the shooter in that video is his son, Hakeem Robinson. He knows his son. You may have thoughts about him as a father, good, bad, or indifferent. He knows who Hakeem Robinson is. And he knows that's him in that shooting. That shooting on that video. In addition to all of this evidence, as I have touched on briefly, you will see cell phone records, communications among the members of this group, these co-defendants, but the cell site location information. Cell site location information confirming what Abdul Robinson Sr. Blue will tell you. He was somewhere else when this crime happened, and how he arrived at Townsend Boulevard to pick Leroy Whitaker, Dominic Varner up. See that cell site location information as well as the pin drop sent to him and the calls. You will see cell site location information for Abdul Robinson Jr. He had 2 phones in his possession that day, a 904 number and a 478 area code number. And both of those place him going to pick Dominic Varner up that morning going over to the apartment complex where Charles McCormick lived, and then back over near the shopping plaza where Torgon lived. And then finally, after relaying information to his father so that Leroy Whitaker and Dominic Barn could be picked up, back over on Brown Jersey Court, where he lived with Hakeem Robinson and their father. Leroy Whitaker, his phone, places him where he did not want to tell you he was at. Where he wants to keep hidden from you. It places him in the area of Charles McCormick's apartment complex, Merrill Road Shopping Plaza, where the murder took place at the time of the murder, and then over on Townsend, where the burglary to Miss Buckley's home took place, and then finally, after getting picked up by Dominic Barner, back Brown Jersey Court. Excuse me, when he got picked up by Blue, was driven back to Brown Jersey Court. And then Hakeem Robinson, he had a couple phones. His primary phone number, a 904 area code, which was very active that day, until it wasn't. That morning, it mysteriously is turned off. It was silent. No calls, no activity, nothing. For a period of hours, covering the stalking, the murder, the flight, till he would have been back home. And then later that afternoon, hey, it's up again. Curious. But then there was a second phone number, a 478 area code number, that the evidence will establish belonged to Hakeem Robinson. And that phone number, data files, FaceTime calls, Instagram calls, things like that. Guess where it was? The area of the shopping center, the area of the murder, at the time of the murder. And over in the area of Townsend, where that Nissan fled and crashed, where he ran away on foot. And then back over near Dalehurst in that area, around the time Natalie would have picked him up and been bringing him back. Curious. Because of all of the evidence, the powerful evidence, the inescapable evidence in this case, I expect that one of the focuses will be on a few witnesses who, again, keep in mind when this murder took place, and you'll see it lasted 10 seconds, 10 violent seconds, but seconds nonetheless. Were some witnesses who, based on how far away they were, their vantage point, how long of a look they got, a number of factors come into play, and you'll have your common sense to evaluate that. Some witnesses who, when they estimated, provided a guess of what they thought the shooter's height might be as he was running and gunning, underestimated the height that we know Hakeem Robinson to be. You'll be able to evaluate that because you'll also have the video. And the video will show what Hakeem Robinson, the shooter, 5 years ago in relation to the victim, Charles McCormick. You'll be able to make your own observations and determinations as to how they physically compare to one another. I also expect that there will be some attacks of Dominic Barner and Abdul Robinson Sr. because their testimony is damning. But when they testify and when those attacks come, I just want you to do two things. One, simply ask yourself, removing emotion as to whether or not you like them or think they're good people. They're criminals. Just not the only ones. Does the evidence, the independent evidence in this case, corroborate what they have to say? Does it establish what they are telling you? And then secondly, remember, they're not strangers. This is a family. And consider, when co-defendants come together to commit a violent murder, angels aren't invited. Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker may have temporarily physically escaped their guilt on January 15, 2020, but that guilt stains them to this day. if Charles McCormick still had the ability to speak, if before he died, hidden truths were revealed.
Excuse me, we need all electronic devices to be turned off. Thank you.
And if Charles McCormick would have witnessed and been aware of and seen and heard all of the evidence that we have discussed, DNA, the fingerprints found in the murder car, the motive found on his account, the video of the murder itself, cell phone records, location information, the nail salon post, and many others. Is there any doubt that if he could stand in here and testify, he would not scream Hakeem Robinson and Leroy Whitaker's guilty name? The evidence will answer for you where they were and what they did January 15th, 2020.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you each step into your respective jury rooms for a bio break since it is 3:50 p.m. But I do want to explain something. This trial is being tried together, and the majority of what will be presented together. But there are some times that things must be presented separately. Opening statements is one of those. So Hakeem Robinson's jury, you are going to step in for a bio break, but you're going to remain in there while Leroy Whitaker's jury will hear from Ms. Schlacks and Mr. Whitaker's opening. And then when that is concluded, you will be excused. And then you will return out, Hakeem Robinson's jury, to hear the opening statement by Mr. Robinson's counsel. So I wanted to explain that. But for now, both sides may step into the jury room to
I haven't seen one of these in a very long time. What about you guys? We got two separate juries. Wow, I've seen it once before, and I can't even think of what trial it was, but this doesn't happen often. Yeah, when she was like, they step out in this room, y'all go to your respective rooms. I was like, oh, each juror has their own room. I'm soft as a mouse now. I'm muffled. Okay, wait a minute. Is this better? Can you hear me now? Okay. I was working on my little headphones and stuff while I had the mic all the way turned down. Sorry, guys. I've never seen this before. I mean, I've seen it before. I can't remember what trial it was where they had two separate juries, but it wasn't like, I can't remember what trial I was watching. But I was sitting up here when she was telling them to go to their respective rooms, guys. I was thinking in my head, I said, oh, so each juror, they really keeping them apart from each other and they can't talk to each other, right? I'm like, okay, they going back to individual rooms until she was like, this jury go this way and this jury go that way. Oh my. So we gonna be confused. The 13th juror gonna keep us all the way together with this trial because we gonna be confused. How we know whose evidence go with who? Oh boy. Four words we really we can't. What you say? The jewel. Hey. Yeah, so I guess this will be different, huh? You know, I if I was a defendant, I would not be okay with this. I mean, like, do they have any say so on this? Like, I would not be okay with you put me on trial with somebody else, and I just don't understand how that works. Do I have any thoughts on spoilers? Any rules? What you mean, therapist? I know it's always with love. You definitely want to hear from me, right? If nobody else, at least from me, right? The Jules. Are you saying like spoilers in regards to this trial? I don't know. What do y'all think about that? Or are you talking about in general, or are you talking about this particular one that we are behind on? Okay, that's fine with me. I mean, because either way, we gonna watch. I want to watch it for myself, right? That's the whole thing, and like doing it with you guys. That's fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, because I like to see the stuff for myself. I mean, I don't. If you tell me, I'm probably gonna watch it anyways. But that's completely fine. Okay, so I guess we get to see what the first jury get to hear, right? You say otherwise, what in the world are we watching it for? Well, hopefully we don't have too many cases where we like behind. And I hope today, remember, um, the jury for Ali is not there tomorrow. So they don't have any court Friday. So we'll be in here Friday, right? And they only have a half a day of the jury instruction. So we should be caught up. And I'm hoping that with that being said, that we'll be all caught up. Yeah, we'll be caught up in no time. So I'm hoping that we'll be fine. Okay, let me go ahead and play so we can make sure. No more wine, boxes of wine. No, don't spoil anything for us. Look. Okay, here we go. I guess so we can get our catching up going on. Okay, it looks like they took a break right there. Let me.
In a strip mall by a lone gunman. There will be no question about that. You will watch the videotape.
There will also be no question whatsoever.
Leroy Whitaker did not pull that trigger. Leroy Whitaker had nothing to do with the death of Charles McCormick. That's what the evidence will show. You're gonna watch a video of Charles McCormick being chased down and shot. The shooter, the lone gunman in that video is not Leroy Whitaker. So how are we here? Why are we here? In this room, everything changes. See, before we come into this room, the state of Florida has the absolute power, the choice, the prerogative to charge or not charge whoever they want. But once we come in here, to our Hall of Justice, they must prove their allegations. They must prove their allegations with actual credible evidence. And I urge you to write right now in the notebooks that were provided to you a little topic I suggest to you. Evidence of Leroy Whitaker's participation in this murder. And ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be one thing and only one thing at the very end of all the testimony, everything that you're going to be presented. It's going to be one name only, Dominique Barner. That's it. That is it. The state star witness of which their house of cards in their allegations against Mr. Whitaker will collapse. Dominique Barner, an admitted two-time killer, paid for, self-proclaimed, paid for assassin. Dominique Barner will waltz into this courtroom and he will try to fill the blatant holes in the state's case. Their star witness will explain to you, well, you know, on January 15th, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office hauls me in. See, I don't just have tattoos on my arms. I have 1993 strapped right on my arm. Pretty distinctive. And Barbara Buckley did describe that in detail. And so the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was able to put together a photo spread within hours of Barbara Buckley's home being invaded by Dominique Barner. And lo and behold, she was, in no uncertain terms, you're going to meet her. She's going to tell you all. Dominique Barner sure scared me. Dominique Barner came into my home. Dominique Barner choked me out. Dominique Barner got me to the point where I just kind of finally faked passing out and sat on my couch and then ultimately smoked a cigarette. Dominique Barner was caught. And to hear the state of Florida talk about Dominique Barner, one might think, one might assume, Dominique Barner must have walked in on January 15th and said, oh, I need to tell all my sins. Oh, I need to confess. That's not what the evidence is going to show. What you're going to learn is that Dominique Barner came in on January 15th and he told just enough about himself to get him off his case. So let him go. He's still in jail, but he's not charged with murder yet. But then you're going to hear, as the murders pile up, see, there's this pesky second murder that you'll hear Dominique Barner was in part of, has admitted to premeditating, has admitted to pleading to that charge of a whole separate case where a truly innocent bystander gets killed. Because unfortunately, Dominique Barner misses who he was really gunning for. Interestingly enough, you will ultimately hear Abdul Robinson Sr. also part of that murder, also pled to that separate murder. But as those charges started piling up, Dominique Barner realized, I need to do what I do. I'll cooperate. See, by the time that Leroy Whitaker and Dominique Barner started spending any time together, Dominique Barner had already gotten his first cooperation against somebody completely different out of the way. Because that's what he does. Abdul Robinson Sr., same thing. Abdul Robinson Sr. has been cooperating since before Leroy Whitaker was born. That's what the evidence will show. Dominique Barner will be the one and only piece of evidence the state will even attempt to convince you that Leroy Whitaker had any part in the death of Charles McCormick. The evidence will not be there. You're going to hear from Barbara Buckley, and I'll tell you up front, I think you'll like her. She's feisty. No one pulls anything over her eyes. And she's going to walk in and she's going to honestly talk to you about that morning. How it was just a normal morning. How she sees two people in her house and she says in very colorful language, "Get the hell out of my house!" Dominic Barner didn't accept that and then was violent with her. And because of that, she was able, in no uncertain terms, with confidence, with 1993 emblazoned on his arm, she picks him out. Dominic Barner did that. The second person, the other person in her home, she can't identify. What will the state try to rely on? Dominic Barner. Dominic Barner and Abdul Robinson Sr. have learned the system. They've learned what to say and how to say it. I urge you, listen carefully as they describe their cooperation agreements. For the two murders that Dominic Barner will tell you in no uncertain terms that he thought about, that he wanted to happen, he put into action, and did commit the murder. For two human beings being gone, what does he look forward to? Well, he has every hope and expectation of walking amongst us again in 20 short years. No mandatory life imprisonment for Dominic Barner. Dominic Barner, by singing the company line, can look forward to 20 years. That's the state evidence. You're going to hear from DNA experts. And I urge you right now, as I remember from jury selection, some of you had done 23andMe, Ancestry.com. I urge you to listen carefully. You're going to hear words like, well, this unknown profile, well, it's consistent with perhaps Mr. Whitaker, and provide computations to try to explain that to you. It is not, I submit to you, and you'll ultimately evaluate for yourselves, like what was revealed for each of you when you did 23andMe and Ancestry.com.
Objection, Judge.
In the ground. I'll sustain that objection.
You're going to hear and see from FBI agent Mr. Corley. And he's going to actually map out for you different phone numbers, and he'll tell you up front, these are approximations of where these phones might have been communicating with towers. And it'll be a lot of convoluted radio waves, all that kind of thing. But he'll try to tell you where he believes these phones were in general terms in Jacksonville. What he won't be able to tell you is who was using those phones or when. And you'll have to listen carefully, and I urge you to do so, for all of the testimony in regards to whose phone is who, and how in the world do we know that person is using it. One thing you'll learn from Agent Corley as well as Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is that oftentimes they'll get phone records for a month or maybe even 2 months and go through the phones to determine who are these people talking to. Just as a way, an investigative tool, if you will, to determine who's actually using these phones. Ultimately, no such evidence will be presented like that in this case, as will there be many things that you will wonder about, but will not be presented. Why? Because the evidence doesn't exist. At the close of all the evidence, after you carefully and critically analyze it, you will realize the state of Florida is on a quest for conviction. They will do so on a house of cards of Dominique Barner, two-time murderer, paid for assassin. And at the close of all the evidence, you will ask, you will suggest and demand that you render the only verdicts that will be appropriate based on the evidence you receive. Those are verdicts of not guilty for Leroy Whitaker. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Schlax. All right, at this time then I'm going to ask Mr. Whitaker's jury to have a step back into your jury room while we bring out Mr. Robinson's jury for his opening, and then we'll bring you out here just as soon as we can. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so we got one jury going back and another jury coming in. Uh-oh, I see some video. They ain't playing this game. They about to show some video. Okay. Talk about going in tough this morning. Woo woo. I'm excited. I guess it'll keep us from the dryness, right? Hey, Kim. Yay. Yes. And hopefully we'll meet that mark today, Kim. Good morning. We're starting a new trial today. Yeah, so this, I see where we're about to see some video. So I'm like, okay, like video. Hey, Samantha. Thank you. Yes, we have two juries in this one because the defendants are charged with different charges, but some of them, it looked like they worked together on one. So it looked like one is charged with a single incident and one of them is charged in two of them. So we got two defendants. Today is 1K day. That's right. 1K day. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and play so we can get to this video that they gonna show us, because I see. Okay. God, I kind of wanted to just go because I don't want to miss none of it. Let's see. Okay.
Good afternoon. This is the first opportunity that I have had to speak with you directly. So I wanted to take this opportunity to reintroduce myself to you. My name is Tara Kawas, and I, along with Christopher DeCos, we have the honor and privilege of representing Hakeem Robinson. Now, the government just got up here and told you that they're going to prove to you, beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt, that Hakeem Robinson is the person who shot and killed Charles McCormick on January 15th of 2020. For members of the jury, they are not going to be able to do that because Hakeem Robinson is innocent. And you are going to be able to see that for yourselves, that there is no way that Hakeem Robinson is the person that shot and killed Charles McCormick. In order to try and prove their case, they're going to ask you to do something that I've never seen before. They're going to ask you to not believe your eyes. They're going to ask you to ignore what you see right in front of you. Because as the government just told you, there's a video recording of this homicide, and you're going to be able to see it, and you're going to be able to watch it. You are going to see a person, someone covered from head, or whatever's on top of his head, to toe, completely covered, chase down Charles McCormick in broad daylight and shoot him to death. And this was done in front of a bunch of witnesses. And the most important question in this case is going to be, who is the shooter? Who is the shooter? Members of the jury, that is the shooter. That is a still shot from the video that you will get. You will be presented with this during the course of this trial. And what these prosecutors are going to ask you to do is to find that Hakeem Robinson, who's clearly well above 6 feet tall and a heavy set person, and was like that 5 years ago, is that person. And it's not just that. They are going to ask you to ignore the descriptions given by each and every person that saw the shooter live. And members of the jury, these witnesses, each and every one of them are going to give you a description somewhere between 5'5" and 5'11". The other description they're going to give you, each of these witnesses that saw this person: slim, slender, thinner. And all those witnesses, they're going to ask you, the government, these unbiased civilian witnesses, discredit them. Don't believe them. They were wrong. The witnesses that they're going to ask you to believe are the ones who are actually involved in this murder. That's right. One by one, they are going to be walking them in here, some of them through that back door. Each one of them, hoping and praying to get some benefit from them. The people that hold all of the power to charge someone, to arrest someone, to drop charges. Then, all of these people are going to point the finger and go, the shooter is Hakeem. They are not going to present you one piece of reliable, direct evidence that definitively proves that Hakeem Robinson is a shooter. It's just going to be based on the lies of the people who actually committed this murder. This, members of the jury, is Hakeem Robinson. Stand up, Hakeem. He is a young, aspiring, talented musician who 5 years ago was wrenched from his family, his life, and his promising career. All because the government refused to look at literally what is right in front of them. And this is why I've asked Hakeem Robinson to stand up in front of you right now, members of the jury. Because you may not have taken too much notice over the past 3 days. Each and every time you walked into the courtroom and you left and we stood up, you didn't realize at that time how important it was to take a look at how tall Hakeem Robinson is and how big he is. But it is going to be the focal point of this trial. Because once you watch that video in the entirety, and then you look at what is standing right in front of you, and you're going to get pictures and stuff around the time that this took place. He hasn't changed, despite what Mr. Cooper is telling you. He is the same. There will be no doubt in your mind that he is not the person that shot and killed Charles McCormick. So how do we get here? You can have a seat, Hakeem. How do we get here where a clearly innocent person is being accused of a crime that he did not commit? And it boils down to perception versus reality. Because you're going to see that Hakeem Robinson, he wasn't arrested until 9 months after the murder. And none of them realized how big he is until he was arrested. But by that time, instead of admitting to the mistake that they made and pulling back and doing an investigation to find out who really did it, they doubled down. And they started to build their case and their witnesses around the idea and the belief that it was Hakeem Robinson that was the shooter. Now, on 5 years ago, January 15, 2020, right on the brink of the world shutting down, right before the COVID-19 virus, Charles McCormick woke up in the morning, headed to Employment Express Agency on Merrill Road to follow up with getting a job. Little did he know that a man named Dominique Barno, and I'm going to say this name for the first time, I'm not sure why the state didn't mention this to you, and his friend Chris Brown had been stalking Charles McCormick that day. Dominique Barno is the one who was checking his Instagram account to see if he was in town that day. Dominique Barno is the one who pulled up his address on the court clerk's website to find out where he lived. He is the one that then tried to track him down and kill him that morning. You will hear that the reason Dominique Barno decided that he wanted to have Charles McCormick killed was all because of a song that he didn't like the lyrics to. The whole story that Mr. Cooper failed to mention to you, members of the jury, is that Mr. Barno will just tell you, I just didn't like that he was singing something he didn't know about. That's the reason why Charles McCormick is dead. And this man, members of the jury, Dominic Barr, the man who planned and orchestrated the murder of Charles McCormick, is going to be the government's star witness in this case. That is the person who they cut a
That's not me. That's the that's the feed. Let's see. Sorry, guys. What
did
is
that
it?
because he wanted the defendant to go free so he could kill him himself. That is their star witness who they're going to ask you to believe. This man was caught red-handed within 24 hours of the murder of Charles McCormick. And months go by of him denying his involvement. And when he realized that who they thought the shooter was, Hakeem Robinson, he pounced on it. He was like, this is how I'm going to get out of here. He decided he was going to lie to the government to get what he wanted, which is the hope of freedom. All he had to do and all he had to say was that Hakeem Robinson is the person behind that mask. And in exchange, I know Mr. Cooper was saying, oh, he's facing life, and that the judge hasn't sentenced him yet. But members of the jury, he's going to tell you the reasons he's doing this, because before this, he was facing mandatory life in prison. He would have died in prison. And in exchange for pointing the finger at Hakeem Robinson, he is hoping to get out in 20 years. Mind you, he's already served 5 of it. So in 15 years, he is hoping to go free. And Dominic Barnell, not going to be the only one. Another witness that they are going to put on this witness stand and ask you to believe, a man by the name of Abdul Robinson Sr., AKA Blue. Now, Mr. Cooper got up here and told you that this man is Hakeem's father, his biological father, but the whole truth is, members of the jury, he's just Hakeem's DNA contributor. The truth is, he has 9 other children by 5 different women that we know about. He has probably fathered a significant percentage of the men or women in Duval County. He was never involved in Hakeem's early life and only came around when Hakeem started to become a little recognized, a little famous with his music, and he started to make some real money. He actually tried to become Hakeem's manager. As you will learn in this trial, in 2020, Hakeem was a local celebrity. He was a rap musician. And you're going to see that it was Blue is going to do what he's doing in this case. He uses people, and he was trying to use Hakeem. He is using the prosecutors in this case to get out of the 2 murder cases that we know that he have committed. He, just like Dominic Barnell, was caught red-handed in this case. He is the person that Dominic Barnell called for help to pick him and Leroy Whitaker up after they had broken into Barbara Buckley's home. But what you're also going to hear, members of the jury, and what is most important, this is not the first time that Dominic Barner and Blue have done this. That's right. Dominic Barner and Blue are co-defendants in a completely separate homicide case. They're co-defendants in that case, and they're co-defendants in this case. And you're going to learn that Blue, this ain't his first time cooperating with law enforcement. He's done that before, so he has experience. He knows that when he is in trouble and he is caught, if I say what the government wants to hear, I get out. He's done it before, and he's going to do it again in this courtroom. And what's more troubling with Blue, members of the jury, in exchange for his testimony in this case, he is hoping to get 76 months. 76 months. He's already served 60. So in less than 2 years, he is hoping to be back on the streets of Duval County. Now, Mr. Cooper just got up there and said the testimony against Hakeem being involved in this work murder is going to be corroborated by reliable evidence. It is not. None of the credible, reliable evidence that he's going to bring in here says that Hakeem Robinson is the guy in that picture. Another one of the witnesses that they're going to bring in front of you, another one that was in that little diagram that they showed, Torrigan Williams. And this is even worse, members of the jury, because their own lead detective is going to tell you they've known for 5 years that Torrigan Williams was involved in this homicide. Dominic Barlow, years ago, told them Torrigan Williams was involved, but he gets a full pass. He's not walking through that door. He's walking through that door. Never been arrested, full-blown immunity for his testimony in this case. And you wonder, wait, why would that happen 5 years later? Well, that's because Torrigan Williams last year got arrested for trafficking in meth. That's the first time he decided to come forward and go, hey, wait a second, I'm in trouble. Prosecutors, I think I know, I have information that you might want. And by this time, members of the jury, 4 years have passed, and this case was plastered all over the internet for anyone to look up and see what they needed to find out about what they needed to say. After he decided to give a statement against Hakeem Robinson, what did? They drop his state case. Dismissed, no action. Then the federal government decided to pick up his case. And Mr. Williams, as they call him to testify, is going to tell you, well, I'm hoping that the feds are going to be a little lenient on me because I am helping in this homicide case. Not one of their witnesses, members of the jury that take the stand, that tried to point the finger at Hakeem Robinson, not one of them are unbiased. Each one of them that are going to walk in here have some angle. They either are trying to help themselves, to get themselves out of their trouble with the government, or something for a loved one. Each one of them that points the finger in some way, shape, or form to Hakeem Robinson is hoping to get something, and not something small, freedom. But members of the jury, what Mr. DeCoste and I are going to ask you to do is to listen to the reliable, credible witnesses in this case. Because what you will see that all the reliable witnesses say was that actually the shooter, they actually saw them with his own eyes, as I told you before. Slim, slender, 5'8" to 5'11". Some of them say 5'5" to 5'8". Notice that not once when Mr. Cooper was giving his opening statement did he give you a description. I'm having to tell you that. And I'm talking about not just civilians, I'm talking about trained police officers. We'll talk about Officer Collins, the one who took chase. You notice when Mr. Cooper was talking to you? Oh, well, you know, he was far away. He was jumping the fence and didn't get a good look. He's getting you guys ready to make excuses for why the description does not match Hakeem Robinson, and not even close. Officer Collins is a trained police officer, been doing this for 20 years, knows how to give information like that so that other people, other officers who are listening, he knows to give reliable information. He may come up in here now, 5 years later, and try to backpedal, members of the jury. Not sure, I don't remember. But you remember what he said at the time. That's the most reliable. Before everyone realized that the descriptions, wait, they don't match. And it's not just him. It's not just Officer Collins. You're going to hear from Officer Graham, another one who saw the shooter in this case. You know what his description was? 21-year veteran with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, 5'8" to 5'10". Now, those are just the officers. Next, we're going to talk about the civilian witnesses. You're going to hear from Victor Kruger. Mr. Cooper mentioned him. He's the guy with the dash cam in his vehicle, the person that was probably the closest to the shooting, who, and he's right, by happenstance, just happened to have this video recording on his dash cam when this happened. But what did you not hear in the state's opening statement? Mr. Kruger gave a description. You want to know what that description was? 5'10" to 5'11", and he was thin. Clearly not Hakeem Robinson. Not the only one. Javaris Roberts, who worked in the Hibet Sports in that strip mall, described the shooter as 5'8" to 5'9" on the skinnier side. Then we've got Aber Ahmad, a woman who was in her garage having coffee in the morning, sees someone matching the shooter's description, jump a fence and walk right in front of her. She describes him as shorter than 6 feet. But the most important one, Renata Boston. If you recall, when Mr. Cooper was talking, he mentioned that the shooter ran through some woods and came out on the other side, and that magically Natalie Gant was there to pick up the shooter because she knew where he was. He didn't mention what Renata Boston described the shooter to look at, because she saw him come out of the woods. Slim build, 5'8" to 5'9", between 160 to 170 pounds. That is not even close to Hakeem Robinson. Multiple independent civilian witnesses, multiple police officers, all describing someone that could not possibly be Hakeem Robinson. And all their testimony, all of them, the ones whose testimony isn't bought with a promise of freedom, they're all consistent. It's clearly not him. The only eyewitnesses that will say that the shooter is Hakeem are the ones who have cut deals with the government. And they're not going to just present these eyewitnesses to you. As Mr. Cooper said, they're going to present all this other stuff, but take a close look at the details of what they present to you, because not one piece of that evidence is going to be direct evidence that Hakeem Robinson is the shooter. Let's start with the cell phone evidence, because it's going to be a lot. All the records that they're going to produce to you, all the cell phone records that definitively show 100% Dominique Barna using his phone, Leroy Whitaker using his phone, Abdul Robinson Jr. using his phone, Abdul Robinson Sr. using his phone. All of them are communicating with each other. You know whose phone isn't being used? Or they don't have a record of being used at all? Hakeem Robinson. Mr. Cooper just got up here and told you that he's going to try to put a phone in the possession of Hakeem Robinson, a phone number that begins with 478. You know whose phone that's registered to? Abdul Robinson Sr., aka Blue's former dead best friend. That phone is registered to his father, not to him. And you're going to see that that phone the day before was pinging in the same place that his father was. They're going to try to make you think and connect that phone to Hakeem Robinson, and they will be unable to do so. Next up, fingerprints and DNA. They're going to try to present you with DNA and fingerprint evidence trying to put Hakeem in that car on that day. But members of the jury, their own expert will tell you, their experts are going to tell you, we have no idea when that DNA was left there or how. We have no idea how that fingerprint, when or where it got there. All that proves to you, members of the jury, is Hakeem Robinson knows Leroy Whitaker. They're cousins. They hang out together. That's a fact that we're not disputing. And what did Mr. Cooper fail to tell you? That DNA was found on a t-shirt that was in the car. It's not just Hakeem Robinson's DNA. The expert is going to tell you that it's mixed up with 3 other people that I don't know who it is that's on that shirt. Then they're going to tell you that, well, I'm going to tell you that the evidence will show that a man's DNA was found in that car. That's going to say, I don't know how my DNA got in there, but it's there. Someone that is completely disassociated with this case. All that's going to prove, members of the jury, is that Hakeem Robinson, Leroy Whitaker, Torgon Williams, they're all friends and that they know each other. He told you that car was had been reported stolen for 2 months. They had been all in and out of that car. That DNA and that fingerprint does not place him in the car on the day of the murder. You're going to hear about all of the DNA that they have been unable to identify or match with someone else. But members of the jury, what I do want you to know is, even though Hakeem hung out with all these guys and he grew up with them and stuff, Hakeem was different because he was making it. Charles McCormick, they said he put out that song. He didn't put out a song. I mean, no one knew about that song. I mean, he tried to release it. He wasn't on the level of Hakeem Robinson, AKA, you're going to hear this name a lot throughout the course of the trial, Ksoo. And what you're going to hear, members of the jury, which is going to be very important. 4 days before the murder of Charles McCormick, Hakeem Robinson was signed to a record label that gave him a $40,000 advance. 4 days before. He was making it, he was leaving, he was doing his music. All of these people, though, they wanted to be around him. They wanted to share in his fame. But Hakeem cannot be put in this just because he hung around with the wrong people and was friends with them. He is not responsible for what they did in their free time. And even the government, well, I thought the government would agree that you cannot convict someone by association. And that is true, members of the jury. Guilty by association has no place in this courtroom. Mr. Cooper also mentioned something about a social media post. But members of the jury, when you view these pieces of evidence, please take them into context. He said it happened right after he made this post, 7 days after he made this post, okay? And it's all assumption and speculation with the phrase that he used. He is trying to say that that is somehow a confession. That post didn't say, hey, I killed Charles McCormick. He's going to ask you to imply that when he mentioned that had something to do with the murder that happened before that he had nothing to do with. But members of the jury, what we are going to ask, and this is what I'm just going to ask, we are at the beginning of this case. You haven't heard any of the evidence or seen any of the evidence yet. All I ask of you, each of you, is to please just pay close attention and really listen. Because when you strip away all the evidence that isn't either bought with money or the promise of freedom, the truth is going to be staring you right in your face. Focus on the credible, reliable, unbiased testimony from the witnesses, coupled with what you can see right in front of them. More importantly, your common sense. Because that is what you will need to see the truth in this case, because it is not him, members of the jury. Mr. Cooper talked about the fact that this case is going to be a puzzle and that you'll be able to see a picture at the end. But I'm going to tell you this, members of the jury. If one piece of that puzzle doesn't fit, it is not guilty. Do not shave the pieces of those puzzles to try to force it to fit. Because when you look, you are going to see the description does not match Hakeem Robinson, not even close. Now, members of the jury, there is a reason why the framers of the Constitution, this country's Constitution, ensured that the government would not have too much control over the freedom of the citizens they are meant to protect. And that was by giving the final word, not to the court, not to the state, but to you. People are innately flawed in that they sometimes can't see the truth when it's staring them right in front of their face, or they can't admit it when they've made a mistake. You are 12 members of this community, 15 members of this community, who have promised to look at this case through fresh eyes. That is all we beg of you, to objectively look at the evidence that is presented to you in this case. Because when you listen to all the credible, reliable evidence in this case, it's only going to prove to you one thing. Hakeem Robinson is innocent. Find him not guilty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kwas. All right, I'm going to